Well, self-organising systems was set up in response to a lot of emergent projects that as soon as they had the sort of the thread of a good idea, suddenly things like bank accounts and organisational structures and decision-making processes needed to be put into place to allow these ideas to sort of go to the next level. And sometimes the expectation of the default world, the world that expects this, can be too burdening for those small groups. So the idea that a lot of the stuff that we would learn is equally applicable to all the different projects, why don't we try and centralise that learning in such a way and set up a simple way for people to open bank accounts, simple committee decision processes, and give them a chance to see if they can pull it together before they actually go to the trouble. And then we help them sort of essentially move out of an incubatory stage into a more fully fledged project if it's looking like it needs to go that way. Some projects only need to last for a few months, so they don't need to necessarily formalise, but they do still need those processes to be able to account for their money and all that sort of stuff. So that's why we set it up. We set it up as a not-for-profit. It's a registered charity, and we hope that one day it will be tax exempt from the point of view of people being able to make donations. And then that money we can use to fund and support and assist the development of the tools and actually help fund some of those emergent ideas. So that's self-organising systems as a model, as a organisation. It doesn't really go anywhere to explain the process of a self-organising system. And that's it's sort of the same question, but comes at it from a slightly different direction. And I think the story I like at the moment to sort of paint it quicker is if I was talking to Bill of Permaculture many years ago, and we were talking about naming permaculture, and I understand the systems design and all that part of it, I probably would have been mounting a case for perma-design or perma-systems and point out that culture, Kulcha, because you've already used the word culture, that's garden, the same principles apply. If you look at the way nature organises nature, then when you strip back the human condition and you go right back to 1,000 years ago, 2,005, 10,000 years, there were very natural ways for us to organise that didn't require management systems and all these sort of stuff. We just able to gather together and look after our own shit, so to speak. So that's where we went with it.
Is a self-organizing system a system in which you have no hierarchy? Is there any kind of leadership, or?
Well, we try and work on a leaderless model. That I talk to Michael often, and we do find it surprising that a lot of people do seem to seek permission to do something. They're fully capable, they totally can. And even though we say there's no leaders and it's a group and collaborative process, they sometimes will just stand and wait for someone to say, okay, yes, you can do that. So to a certain extent, there are more experienced participants, and they tend to give permission, but not wait for the question to be asked. Set up the process in such a way it becomes sort of fluid. And that's where sort of, when you look at Digger Street, that would be a definitive statement of that sort of a process, dumbing it down to the point where it's so easy to copy that you don't need a leader to tell you what to do. You can just look and go, it's obvious. If I want to be part of this community, I wash up here, I eat here, I cook there, and you don't need to sort of tell anyone. So that's the sort of like the goal, yet we accept the fact that, much like Digger, there is someone always, to a certain extent, more experienced tends to be driving the project a little bit more than others. Well, Digger Street is the fourth or fifth project in a series of projects that I've been involved in. It's like a project I started many years ago, an exploration of private space and public space, and how we treat our private spaces and the creation of our houses and fences and blocks of flats, how they isolate humans. And I see them more as battery-caged humans, force-fed the junkiest, cheapest food with the maximum output, getting up at night and going to work, sort of battery farming of human energy. And that the idea that you could create places where public and private space tended to disappear, you could reduce private space to, say, just bedrooms, reintroduce common areas, and tear down the fences and centralise the kitchen and drop the cost of living and reduce the waste because you're buying larger quantities stuff
In
in bulk. And so the 15 years of these projects, is each iteration has been an improvement on the last. And because of the Burning Man side of things, we document and document, because we believe that's really important in regards to informing those that come after some of the things that we've already learnt. And Digger Street's really good at that. And so that's what Digger Street is now. It's been a bit of an exploration in new urbanism, because we've been able to retrofit a neighbourhood, 4 or 5 houses, and it's been going for about 5 years, and it's been an incredibly fun and successful project. However, like all cultural projects, they do tend to have a life, and at this particular stage, Digger Street as a physical location, right, will probably not run for much longer. However, it will shift into everyone lives on Digger Street. And so all the documentation, all the manuals, everything we've learnt, we'll put up at the Digger Street site for everyone else to download, and we'll try and make Digger Street more of a connection of networked, intentional communities that have similar ideas and similar ways to live, and help those that are looking to live in those sort of spaces, find them and talk about them and learn from them. So Digger Street will continue. At the physical part of it, there might be a change. We're not fully sure one way or the other, just weighing it up. The eclipse has happened, and now it's time to sort of look at things afresh, and I'm keen to go and explore some other forms of new urbanism or community collaborative projects, so we'll see. Digger Street's really allowed us to explore with even property developers alternative ways of developing property. So if I was, say, looking at an extended family, which Australia is very much made up of extended migrant family, we're all migrants, some very multi-generational, and it's not the norm, so to speak, for them to live so far apart from each other, and so the internal traditional family networks that they're used to experiencing and benefiting from are broken up by our battery cage thing. So if you look at all the mortgages of this particular family that's spread out, say, around a city like Melbourne, if that family got together and had a meeting and a chat and just decided, well, where would we like to live and which block would we like to get, and then you start getting this focused energy of a family towards a street or a neighbourhood, that's one way of bringing it together. The other way is, I think, basically bringing up the real estate agents and stuff like that, and looking for that landowner that has the 4 or 5 properties for rent, and they may not be all available now. He knows there's going to be a turnover, and so from that point of view, you grab one, and as long as you look after that one, then he'll give you another one, or she'll give you another one, and so on and so on. You explain to them what you want to do, and they'll either say yes or they'll say no. It's rare, I think, but that's how we did that one. We looked for that, and we found a place where the owner had quite a few houses, and he was quite happy for the fences to come down. As for owning the land and buying the houses, I don't think that's the big issue. If I had $1 for every time I've heard I'm saving up money to buy some land that all my friends can come and live on, I'd already have a big block of land with lots of friends living on it, so to speak. The issue for most of these projects is actually the psychographics, and the idea that millions of people suddenly will flee from the city to the country because of a supposed impending collapse of systems horrifies me, because none of them know how to share, none of them know how to grow their own food. They'll just grow up the country. Better that they stay in the cities. That you can't have that migration. So you don't need to run away to the country. You don't need to find that 10,000 acres of land or anything like that. You can actually start now by running an ad that says, looking for people that would like to explore collaborative, creative living together. These are some of the things that we've already agreed to in regards to how we would handle our money and how we would do this, and dig a sort of set of guidelines or whatever, and meet at a coffee shop and start talking and chatting, and getting an idea of what sort of a place, and then start looking for that rental property that you're going to agree to shift into. And I think you can start learning whether or not that community is going to be any good at running as a community without buying any land, because in a way the rental landowner takes one of the participants out of the firing line in regards to a whole suite of challenges that are well, we're only doing this to help you pay your mortgage, or, you know, you're throwing your weight around unfairly because you own the land, and, well, they do, and so, you know, there's this imbalance. When you're paying rent, and everyone's paying equal rent, then there is no person there that you can challenge on that level. So again, I think it makes a lot of sense to play in urban city environments, you know, these sort of type living experiences, before you actually go and buy the land and do all that sort of stuff. And teach people how to share again, teach people how to communally cook again and to cook in larger numbers again. And when those skill sets are there, if they decide to race out to the country, well, they're not going to be such a drain on the communes and the communities that exist out there. So I don't know if that sort of rambled off a bit in regards to discussions about Digger Street and getting those communities going, but I don't think there's a real one way or another. I think every block, every neighbourhood, every group of people, different sort of variations, but generally the formula. I see transitions as being, well, as I understand Transition Network, once it's moved out of Totnes and it's become more of a global thing, that it's not so much about recreating the wheel, it's about networking existing organisations to be able to assist them in making the transitional steps in community. And I don't think self-organising system has a mission one way or another like that. If someone came along and said they've got a creative way to blow up balloons, we would probably look at that just as much as we'd look at a community. That's not really what self-organising systems would be doing. Well, comparing it now to Digger Street, I would say that we're an example of a property that's trying to take advantage of the stuff that you need to know to be able to do what it's got to do.
Right.
However, our experience in Cairns with a network like Transition Towns has been positive, yet difficult to implement, because the population numbers are so lean that when someone comes in with a new umbrella, to a certain extent it detracts the existing focus in the community. And while this is fine in Brisbane or Melbourne or Byron or those sort of places where there's lots of, you know, energy and it's relatively stable, with Cairns, because of its tidal movement of people between, you know, wet and dry seasons, and a lot don't come back, it's really hard to invest new energies into new networks like Transition Towns. So it hasn't really moved up here the way that it could. The permaculture groups are still probably the dominant, you know, sort of transitioning sort of process in the area. So it's great. I've seen it work lots of other places, and I'm a real supporter of it. It just hasn't quite fired in Cairns. So as a result of that, you would say that Digger Street hasn't really benefited from Transition Towns, other than going, great, there's other people out there that sort of think the same. Yeah. The last 4 years, to be able to have finally seen 10 to 12 years of development bring the food and the washing, you know, all those processes. No, I haven't been to the supermarket in years, you know, like, gives you then the stability in the space to look at the psychographics. You know, that whole social angle of why people are gathering and how long they can gather for before they want to tear each other's throats off. You know, there is that part, and I think Digger Street's made huge inroads in regards to understanding the dynamics that are needed in a community for it to work. And I know that I've mentioned to you in the past the power of the role of the women in community and all that sort of stuff. We've really experienced those experiences in such a way that we can repeat them and we get the results, and so we can sort of say, cool, we've learnt from this, that if we want a stable and gentle and kind community, then the women are at the core of that. And so that stability and safety and all that sort of stuff needs to be there for them to feel safe, you know. And then from there you can build out. And you know, the biggest stumbling blocks we've tended to have been people that assume there is a leadership vacuum at Digger. And particularly alpha males that will come into space. They look around and they don't see any other alpha males, so they figure he must have gone down to the pub and here's their chance to alpha male around the place. And then it's only when they start doing that that they realise there's resistance, because here's a community that does quite fine without alpha males. You know, so we've learnt a lot like that, and I wish I've written some of it down, and I'm going to take 4 months off now and write the rest of it down, and hopefully I'll be able to give you a lot more sort of details on those sort of observations. Yeah. So Digger Street's done wonderful in that area, incredibly so. And the ordering, the food ordering system, how is that? That is so simple. Chalkboard, run out, write on the chalkboard, photograph the chalkboard, email it to the supplier. They deliver it, transfer the money in the bank account. It's easier and more convenient than going to a supermarket. You know, so all those hours of shopping and the petrol and who's going and, oh, why did you buy the feta cheese, you know, the stuffed olives, things that blew our food budget that week, all gone. Yeah, well, and because in that kitchen, if you have I think, you know, Digger Street and these places evolved from dysfunctional share houses or warehouses, and some of the biggest arguments are about food. And, you know, you open a fridge and there's 4 different milk bottles and 3 lettuces all in different stages of decay, but no one can touch that lettuce because it's not their lettuce, you know. So now you've got a big mouldy fridge that you've got to clean out. And somebody, well, it's not my food. I got my, you know, all this gone, right? And if you create a space where people have enough food, they can see the food, and that they're thinking in their mind, they're living, you know, with a kitchen of abundance, you know, a food area of abundance, their behaviour changes. They don't start thinking about, I better get to the kitchen earlier, or I better grab a snack here and a snack. They're comfortable to wait for the community meals and comfortable for wait for the process and be part of it. And again, a lot less effort. You know, when you look at 20 people cooking in their own apartments and everything, and then you look at how we feed 20 people at Digger, a lot less effort. So I think they're the real big learnings, which I'm hoping will come out in the manuals when people grab the manuals.
And these are available on...
They'll be available at Digger Street, yeah, and
Digger
which you'll
Street.
get through diggerstreet.com, which you'll get through, you know, from self-organising systems. So Confest has been around for a long time, and I've been going there for, I don't know, nearly 20 years. It'd have to be getting nearly 20 years. And that's a classic space. That is like one of the best examples of a self-organising system that I've seen working for quite some considerable time. And that's where I met Michael and Richard and the other people in self-organising systems, and, you know, learning that the struggles we were having in Confest also happened in other communities and other spaces. And so we learnt a lot out of Confest. We still continue to learn out of Confest, and we still contribute back into Confest. So Confest doesn't really have an organizer per se. It has a group of people that come together and want to be making that space, and they believe in making the experience and not buying the experience. And, you know, that's the pluses that come with Confest, and really that is a foundation chunk of information that I would be bouncing off, all those experiences at Confest, along with Burning Man and a couple of other events, Rainbow Serpent and that, but Confest would be probably the one that changed my life the most, I think.
So could you briefly explain what Burning Man is and what Confest is concretely?
Okay, well, similarly, Confest and Burning Man literally started not too many kilometres from each other, you know, just about 20 years apart. And back in the 70s, Confest started with some gatherings in Golden Gate and that in San Francisco, and that went around the world, and now the only pocket left of Confest in the entire world is actually down Melbourne, you know, New South Wales way, right? So the idea of participation and creating space, and, you know, the decommodification of culture, and, you know, radical self-reliance and welcoming the stranger. Well, these are all Confest ideas and ideals, and they try to implement them. Burning Man started about 20 years later, so to speak, drives exactly the same path. However, I don't know whether it's just Californian, Silicon Valley, San Francisco energy. They've managed to move at a rate of knots that Confest hasn't been able to move. And now it celebrates itself in, you know, a 50,000 plus, you know, gathering in Nevada out in the desert, where because of its size now, it's getting harder and harder to say that it's more making experiences. There's now a lot more people that go just to buy the experience. I went to Burning Man. Did you do anything? No, I just went and partied and had a great time. It was awesome. Did you make anything? No. Did you? Yeah, no. The whole thing is meant to be based around participants standing up. They book no artists in a performing sense. They will commission works, and they'll build no stages per se. They'll be responsible for toilets, roads, water, security, safety, and they literally like presenting to their participants a blank canvas, which is a salt lake bed, and say, well, now you build. Right? You don't need to worry about any of that. We've taken care of that. You now build the city. And they do build an incredible, amazing city, and looking at Confest and Burning Man together, again, Burning Man is one of those foundation building blocks of where people are actually making the experience themselves, and so Burning Man's there, and, it's an important one. Yeah, I'm sure there are others. Rainbow Gathering's another extremely good example. I've not been to one, so I can't talk about it. How, from what I understand, their ability to gather in quite remote locations and look after themselves and feed, and I very rarely hear of any dramas, and some of them can be quite big. So I think that would be another example to mention, but it's not one that I could talk of from experience.
So Confest stands for Conference Festival.
Yes.
And it's all about workshops.
Well, not all about.
Right.
However, it does pride itself that on the conference side of things, and it has over 600 workshops generally over the 5 or 6 days that it's on, and they're quite interesting, different topics and all that sort of stuff. So it prides itself on that, and the festival part of it, a bit hard to sort of define what a festival is. Like, I hear people walk around here going festival, and I think, well, it's not really a festival per se. It doesn't feel like a festival.
It's a gathering.
It feels like a gathering.
Right.
It feels like that. So I'm sure now if they were probably trying to do it, they'd be going con-gatherer or con-gather. They might be trying to say it a little bit different today. So the festival side, I think they could probably put a bit of work into. The conference workshop side of things is already just exceptionally good. So that's definitely Confest's big strength. Yeah, and the development of the community kitchens, which is where Michael Smith sort of started that gypsy kitchen process. And this would be an example of a gypsy kitchen, and Digger Street to a certain extent is an example of a gypsy kitchen. Same sort of processes, same sort of maths, just some different variations on a theme. Good to see the Coolgardie in here and all that.
Is that an old? You've had that for like a long time in the.
Well, I've only seen one of them one other time, actually by Michael Smith at the Gypsy Kitchen at Confest. Oh, it could have been Kristen actually, because however, that one came out of Jenny, Midgley and Nina, I think, sort of looking at alternative ways that we can keep the fruit and vegetables cool without having the generators and the fridges and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's been quite successful. Everything seems quite fresh and cool in there.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it works well. Yeah, it's nice.
What about Burning Man? Why do we call it Burning Man? Do you know the...
Larry'd probably shoot me if I actually went around and said any particular specific answer to why do we call it Burning Man. I think it was just self-evident from the early burns on the beach. It was a man shape and they were burning it.
Right.
So they just called it Burning Man. And I think wisely they've actually not really tried to attach too much of a story to it. They've allowed the majority of the participants to develop their own sense of what Burning Man means to them. So when they're looking at it burning, you've probably got, maybe 50,000 people and 20,000 different ways of viewing it, which I think to a certain extent is its success. It hasn't actually defined what it is. It's actually allowing you to define what it means to you as a participant. So it's a good name just to have there. Yeah. Well, that's the one I want to do after Digger Street. I'm hoping someone else might have the energy to keep going with parts of Digger Street. I can help with parts of it. And where I would like to go now is back into an urban space, because the permaculture project aspect at Digger Street hasn't worked as a sustainable food source. It has worked as a therapeutic component to maintaining sanity, that psychographic, and it's a really good educational space to be able to teach people and have people learn and experience.
It's about community, living in the community.
Yeah, so the permaculture works well there, right? However, I don't think, unless you've got a group of people that are going to stay on that land for 6 or 7 years or 2 or 3 years, the garden's always going to wobble. Just wobbles, you really need those people to really take that interest and keep it going. So I did find out through some of our other projects that we had a lot of very talented people come through that could code and do graphics and all these sort of things that I thought, hold on a second, well, do you want to woof that way? Don't worry about the garden, so to speak. We've got 3 woofers out there in the garden, can't do anything more. And then we just started talking about digital woofing. It just became that idea of, can you have these projects that allow people to come and live, do 4 or 5 hours on digital-based projects, get the roof over their head and accommodation and all that collaborative experience of developing online projects together. And that's what I'm hoping that the next digital woofing project will be. Probably about June 2013, I'd like to see something start. Well, you're more likely to be able to take that digital work and be paid by a company to get the money to pay what you need than you are to be able to grow the fruit and veggies to be able to feed the people in the community. So I think one of the issues with Digger Street is that its only real revenue source is its rent. So if it doesn't have 100% occupancy, it always struggles. You're never going to get 100% occupancy all year round on any project. So developing that secondary revenue, or you decrease your costs by growing your own food, we haven't been able to do that successfully enough. Right? So we need to look at other ways to create the revenue. And that's when the digital thing just started to just emerge out of that space. I mean, other people have tried, you know, the idea of setting up cleaning businesses to, you know, basically we've got lots of people around the place sitting around sometimes going, I'd like to do something, you know, well, maybe we could do something like that, but they never really quite gained any traction, they never quite worked. Yet through Adam's Dam and the Eclipse and Digger Street, through all the open source websites we work on, we've always got stuff that can be done. And from that point of view, they can work on those projects and they can contribute to the space, help us get those projects over the line. Hopefully some of those projects people are getting paid for, we're getting paid for as a project, and we can develop that secondary revenue that way. Community sort of owned media. So, like, first of all, to explain how I process my ideas, I believe that time is one of the most important things. You have the best idea, best team, best everything. If it's not the right time, it's not going to work. It's just another factor, you know, like with the other factors. So sometimes you get ideas, you can take them so far, you put them down because there's no energy or it's the wrong time or anything like that. And then new energy 5 years later comes along and suddenly you reactivate the project again. So we did community-owned media projects about 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, digital publications, PDFs, all that sort of stuff. We liked it. We thought it was really, really good. So we set up a thing called Paper-Free Press. And the whole idea is to produce publications that are not bound by paper. They're digital publications. And, you know, we're moving down that path, and that's all going really well. And one of them is the Friendly Planet Guide. Because when we just one day sitting around the table at Digger, and this is where Digger is great, the way it generates ideas and thoughts and memes just every night. There's like 50 new wows, you know. There's a Lonely Planet Guide, but there's no Friendly Planet Guide. And who wants to travel a lonely planet?
Indeed, yeah. It's a good one.
So, you know, that's an idea, and to manifest the Friendly Planet Guide, it's really about collating and aggregating information, some graphics and all that sort of stuff. Perfect for a digital woofing project. You know, and then if anyone does support it through sponsorship or advertising or anything like that, then there's the revenue that helps support the project in continuing. That's the Friendly Planet Guide.
Friendly Planet Guide, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, it is.
I'll buy it.
I'm looking for it. I'm looking forward to it. Traveling around the world as a friendly planet.